Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner, and you have us live at 8 o'clock, 8:05, 8:05, all right, okay.
8:03, come
8:03. So welcome to Shepherd's Corner, and once again, I have the shepherd with me, and we have a very interesting topic. We're going to be talking about marijuana. Decriminalize it, not legalize it. What is this all about, Archbishop G? And you have a big question. Should we legalize marijuana?
Well, Derek, I suppose it depends on where you stand.
Yeah.
If you live in California or Colorado, you say definitely yes. But they haven't yet figured out the social effects of the legalizing of marijuana in those states. And there's a whole muddle here. So I heard the Prime Minister talking about decriminalizing. I heard the head of DOMA talking about decriminalizing, but the journalist got on the radio on Saturday morning after Gregory spoke at his conference and said, legalize marijuana, that's what the head of DOMA has said. Well, that's not what he said. He said decriminalize. And as he came on to start to speak, his words were, I think it's a very progressive move to decriminalize marijuana. There's a huge difference between the two things.
I think people need to understand the difference between legalizing and decriminalizing, because I'm quite sure that, as you said in the article, they use it interchangeably.
And because the media don't understand the difference, and they think one is the other, they're talking about something that is so imprecise that it really causes a muddle in the minds of people. So to talk about legalize is to talk about places like Colorado, Washington, and California, who in their laws, it is legal to possess marijuana in any amounts. So you can go and set up a shop selling marijuana and marijuana infused goodies, cookies, and whatever else you want it.
Right.
And that's like if you have a shoe shop, you have a candy shop, you have a marijuana shop. So you could put it in a mall. This is open, and this is all out in the open, and it's a legitimate business like every other legitimate business. That's what legalize means. Decriminalize means that it is still illegal to possess large amounts of marijuana. And it is still a problem if you possess small amounts, but it's not going to be a legal problem. So in the decriminalizing, what we're saying is, rather than charging somebody through a criminal court, you have a drug court that has different fines. So the fine for marijuana possession should be rehab center, should be community service, should be something to help the person to deal with their life and the addiction, and something to move it forward. And so your first offense on using marijuana will not be a criminal offense. And the real challenge with the criminalizing of marijuana is that when you have a young guy, he goes into jail for marijuana possession. He now is mixing with real criminals who are into jail for stealing, hijacking, for all kinds of big crimes, and pushing and all kinds of big crimes. He comes out of jail graduating from a petty criminal to a master criminal, having spent time with the best. And so that is not of service to society. Because his life has not been improved by the penalty that has been imposed upon the use of drugs. But marijuana is a dangerous drug. And that's the piece that a lot of people don't want to hear and don't want to deal with.
But you hear a lot of youths, I mean, and I
Natural.
Work with a lot of youths. And they would say, well, Uncle Derek, you know, I know a doctor who smokes marijuana. I know somebody who finished university and they're still smoking marijuana. You know, so I don't get it why you are saying that, look, this thing is not good for you.
Well, there are many people who smoke marijuana and still achieve. But there are a lot or enough studies that suggest that marijuana is a depressive. And what it does is it dumbs down the person. So if you were able to be a straight A student you'll become an A- student. Or if you were a B student, you might become a C student or failing. So the higher your IQ, the more you can compensate in the use of the drug. The lower the IQ, the more it is going to affect your performance. Because, and certainly in the teenage male, marijuana inhibits testosterone, and that's what a guy burns to achieve. Okay. So if he is not achieving, if his tolerance level, he becomes more mild and more mellow and less aggressive and doesn't have that edge and the whole world is nice, and so he's not really pushing to excel, and excellence is no longer part and parcel of his horizon, then whatever he could have achieved, he will achieve less than that. And therefore, you're never going to be the best version of yourself. You're always going to be a dumbed down version of yourself. And it's part of the way the drug chemically reacts in a person, that you just become a more mellow person who does not push for the edge of excellence.
Right. You lose you lose ambition and that kind of
Correct.
thing for excelling. I saw in your article it has many social and psychological effects. It can be destructive to individuals and society, but making a person a criminal for smoking marijuana is not a solution. It brings more harm than the intended good to society. Now, somebody reading the article, they said, well, okay, if you're going to decriminalize marijuana, are you going to also decriminalize the pusher who's selling the marijuana?
No. The idea of decriminalizing, sorry. The idea of decriminalizing marijuana isn't saying that marijuana is a good thing.
Okay.
And isn't saying that it is good for society. It's saying it is harmful. But we don't need to use a criminal concept to deal with the harm for the individual user.
Yeah.
For the pusher, that's different. The pusher is a criminal offense. You see, it's only if you legalize it that the pusher becomes a businessman who runs a legitimate business. And that has its own problems. And they're trying to figure out what those problems are and what's the real social consequence of it. The decriminalizing of marijuana is proposing that marijuana is still an illegal substance in the society, but having possession of small amounts of it will be a penalty, but not a criminal penalty.
Okay. You say the challenge with the current law, and this is what you're talking about, is that it criminalizes people for possession. The person is a user and maybe an addict, but is he or she really a criminal? The poor black male is the most vulnerable. Without an adequate support system, he is likely to become imprisoned. He enters as a substance abuser and is at risk of graduating as a master criminal. How is that beneficial to the user or the society? And you now, as a member of Living Water Community, we have a rehab center.
Correct.
And you've worked with
lots of addicts.
Lots of addicts. What now? You see,
teenage addicts, adult addicts.
You see, we're approaching this from the other side.
Yep.
And a lot of people who are advocating for it are approaching it from quite a different angle.
I understand that.
You know, and so having worked for many years with addicts, what have you seen? What is your experience?
Well, for me, my biggest nightmare and my worst experience with the marijuana drug, one day I got a call, urgent, come. When I went, there was a young man, he was 19, 20 years old, and he was jumping up and down saying that he was God. And he really believed what he was saying. And I had to talk him down, calm him down, get him into my car, and take him to the mental institution in St. Anne's and have him admitted. It was a marijuana psychosis.
Okay.
in a marijuana psychosis, the brain splits and it can't connect reality anymore. Now, that guy spent 3 months in St. Anne's. 3 months. If you have a second psychosis, after your first one, you will come back out and you'll be fairly normal. After your second one, you'll be a little impaired. If you have a third one, it'll be clear and everybody will know, and you'll never have a regular job again. But each psychosis you have, you lose capacity. Yeah. The first one, a little bit of capacity, but you lose the edge. Mm-hmm. By the second one, you've lost a lot more capacity, but you'll still hold on. Mm-hmm. By the third one, you cannot function with the normalcy that you could have functioned before. Now, I have had 5 guys with marijuana psychosis that I have had to work with. Mm-hmm. Now, you know, it is real. I know the current argument is, well, it isn't marijuana that caused the mental illness. Mm-hmm. It was actually mental illness. It was always there. Because now that we have introduced marijuana legally into such and such and such a state, there are no more instances of psychosis than they had before. I don't buy the argument. Because the person off of marijuana has never had a psychosis again.
Right.
Okay?
So that's the proof.
If it was not marijuana, mm-hmm. then you take the person off of marijuana, they would have a second psychosis in their life. And the first guy, he's doing really well. He came off of it. He went through rehab. He got himself. He's married. He's doing well. But that's because he came off of the marijuana. If he had continued on, and the thing is, Derek, you know, 3 people smoking marijuana, the same marijuana, right, every single day, one of them will have a psychosis, and the other 2 will be fine, eh? Because it has nothing to do even with the marijuana that you're smoking. But then on top of that, I've known people who had used marijuana who said to me, you know, they smoked and they went into hallucinations. Mm-hmm. And one of them, driving in a taxi, started to believe that the man driving the car was about to kidnap him.
My goodness.
And had to fight himself to tell himself, I know it is not true, so don't hit the guy. Because he wanted to hit the guy because this thing is happening in his mind. Yeah. Now that wouldn't be psychosis, that would be something in the weed that you were smoking. Yeah. That triggered this guy with a kind of paranoia and a hallucination. Now this person is a high-functioning person. That was the end of him on marijuana. Right. But he's a high-functioning person that has no history of mental illness in his family or no experience of mental illness after that. But that was a borderline experience of paranoia where he started to lose contact, and this wasn't deep into smoking. He had started smoking maybe about 3 or 4 weeks at that stage. Mm-hmm. So, and again, a guy who was about 17, 18 years old. So I have seen things that create, that we're talking about mental health issues, that however you cut it, the connection between the person and the psychosis is the marijuana use.
The distinction, I just want to just share with some people, you know, in terms of the research that we did. In terms of short-term effects, there's short-term memory problems, severe anxiety, including fear that one is being watched or followed, paranoia. Paranoia, right? Correct. Very strange behavior, seeing, hearing, or smelling things that aren't there. Not being able to tell imagination from reality. Correct. Psychosis, which is what you were sharing with us. Yeah. Panic. Yeah. Hallucinations, loss of sense of personal identity.
That's the other big one, eh? You see when a person starts smoking, their whole personality changes. So it's not, you see, the drug of marijuana stays in your system for 30 days. Yeah. 30 days. If you smoke marijuana today, you come back at the end of October, and the drug, the THC is still in your system. We can still detect it in your system. Correct. With alcohol, you drink today, tomorrow, it's out of your system. Yeah. And so you can't compare the two although there's enough problems with alcohol.
Yeah.
So we can't act as if, well, alcohol is okay and marijuana is a problem. Both have serious social problems. Alcoholism is a serious social problem and a mental health problem. And so, you know, both have problems. But the difference with the problem is if the person is not overusing in addiction, one is out of the system the next day and the other one will not be.
Well, because I work in the energy sector, it's one of the things that they do for all workers coming in. First, they have what we call random drug tests.
You have a no tolerance policy.
No tolerance policy.
If you're a CEO or a deckhand,
correct,
and they catch you in marijuana, that's the end of you.
Yeah, well, they have sometimes, employee assistance programs where they will try and probably get you in to New Life Ministries and so on and try and get you.
So you all have decriminalized it.
And we've decriminalized it. So we don't jail them, but we would try and tell them, listen, because what we have, I mean, research has shown, and this is controlled research, so they use an airline pilot. An airline pilot in a controlled environment, and so they're using simulators, and they had that airline pilot smoke marijuana, and they told him, land on the runway. In the first hour, he could not land where he was supposed to land. Second hour, he still was outside the area. Third hour, and this went on for, as you were talking about, went on for 24 hours. He could not land where he was supposed to land on the simulator. This is proven, right? And it's a film that I show where it affects your ability to do complex things.
I really should be walking around when, you know, you could get a stick to test marijuana use. I used to keep them when I was working with youth a lot. That's the pharmaceutical that would supply me, and I would always have 6 in my office, because anytime I suspect a young person of using, I would tell them, come, you see this cup? Go and fill it up for me and come back.
Correct.
And I'd dip it in and say, come, let's see. And you know, many of them it was positive.
Yeah.
I say, okay, so I should walk around with that anytime I go in on an airplane. And I ask the pilot, look, please, just fill this up for me. Yeah. I need to know before I land, before I get to this plane with you.
That's real. So that they're showing that this affects your ability to function, especially when you're doing complex tasks.
Complex tasks that require multiple processes at the same time.
It says, under short-term effects, lowered reaction time.
Yes.
Lowered reaction time.
So if you're operating a machine, which is a motor car, a boat, anything.
Now, let's go back to your article. They said, on the other hand, decriminalizing refers to removing the legal penalties, prisons or fine for simple possession and providing alternatives. In several countries, drug courts have been established so persons can be mandated to treatment.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that this is the way that we should go.
Exactly. So it's no longer a criminal offense, but it doesn't mean it doesn't go through a legal process. And that's what people haven't gotten. By talking about decriminalizing doesn't mean that it's now a free-for-all. Everybody passing the Dutchie on the left-hand side, and everybody, you know, having a free-for-all with marijuana. No, not at all. Because there are several harmful effects of marijuana on individuals and therefore on the whole society.
I think that that's what a lot of people may not be getting. How does it affect society?
Well, if you are not the best version of yourself, you are affecting society.
Correct.
You're affecting me, because I come here with the good people of God on TCN, on Shepherd's Corner. They're expecting an A-rated show. Yeah. And you are not the best version of yourself, and we get down to a C-rated show. You're affecting me directly. And you're affecting them directly. So if you are not the best version of yourself, you're affecting me and you're affecting the whole society.
What about if you're a doctor and you have to perform an operation?
Well, and then the risk now, depending on what work you're doing.
Yes.
Because depending on the kind of work you're doing, the use of marijuana will severely impair your judgment. And therefore, you would have a different thing. Now, some people will say, no, my whole thought process is slow right down. I see a lot more clearly. And that might be true for some people, and it might be true for some things, but there are, it's like using alcohol and driving a car. That's a no-no. Because once you're on any kind of mind-altering substance, your reaction time has come straight down.
Correct.
And therefore, your response time is not what it ought to be. And therefore, you're affecting the people that you're supposed to be serving in whatever job or capacity you are. And you're not becoming the best version of yourself because you lowered your capacity for excellence and high achievement.
And therefore, we're all called to excellence.
We're all called to become the best version of ourselves.
Yeah. Our position, you're saying, our position must be evidence-based.
Correct.
In the U.S., the data measuring the impact of legalizing marijuana are insufficient. Early indications are that social challenges have increased in the states where marijuana has been legalized. You want to expand on that?
Well, you know, it's really early still. And there are several challenges or several reasons why it might be so. But there are higher social problems in Colorado, for instance, now than there were before marijuana was legalized. And the evidence is not clear enough to know the why. So some will say, well, every addict has now reached Colorado because it's a drift in because they're the only one. But some evidence is also that the people who are creating social problems are from there and have been there for a while. So it's really difficult to know what it is. But what I am saying is you have to go now on research. And we have to be able to do good research in terms of what are the effects, what are the causes, what are the things. And if the research is taking us in different directions, we have to pursue that. Because we can't just simply do this because I like it or I don't like it, or I want it legalized or I don't want it legalized, I want it decriminalized or I don't want it. And the society, before it jumps in to a big shift like this, really has to look at the information. Now, there's a group of people going around the Caribbean pushing for the decriminalizing of marijuana. And I've listened to them. And they're mixing up several things all together. And they're using different hype and emotion to sell their prospect of a marijuana, a free-to-use marijuana world. When I was in Barbados, I went to one of the town hall meetings that they had. I listened to it, and I was surprised that this was not a scientific, evidence-based conversation, but it was much more emotional, emotive, argumentation for decriminalizing. So this was not a conversation where we are seeking truth and evidence. It was really a campaign for decriminalizing marijuana or for legalizing marijuana, whichever one they were pushing on at the particular time. And I don't think that that's useful. And I don't think that that's a useful process for a judicial process to involve itself in, because once it's a campaign for legalizing, then it's not an open conversation. And we're not going to take the evidence into base because you are for it and I'm against it, and there we go. But I think there's a space here between these two positions where we have to follow the evidence. I know that the rehab center here in Trinidad and Tobago has treated many, many, many people whose gateway drug was marijuana. They've also treated many people who've come to them not only with marijuana addiction, but marijuana psychosis, that they had to go and get straightened out first and come back to get treated for the marijuana addiction. They've had many people whose lives and families and jobs came into problems because of marijuana addiction. So we can't act as if marijuana and addiction is not a problem. We can't act that way.
What I'm seeing here is just a couple things, and just to let everybody know some of the research that we've done, and I will call some of the places where we did the research. Neurobiological effects of early life cannabis exposure in relation to gateway hypothesis, Maria Elgren, right? And this was done at the Karolinska University, right? So some of this is here. So I just want to share with you guys outside there and ladies outside there. We spoke about lower reaction time, but there's also
I was wondering if you were saying that it's only the guys smoking marijuana. Go to your point. Go to your point.
Increased heart rate, risk of heart attack. increased risk of stroke, problems with coordination impairing safe driving or playing sports. I mean, we really need
this.
Right. Yeah. Sexual problems for males. Fellas, I know you don't even want to hear that, but unless letting you know, this is proven sexual problems for males. And up to 7 times more likely, well, to contract sexual transmitted infections than non-users for females.
Boy, that's a high percentage.
That is a high percentage, you know, and I'm not even starting on, this is just the short-term effects.
What's the long-term effects?
Long-term effects, decline in IQ, up to 8 points if prolonged use started in adolescent age.
Correct.
Poor school performance and a higher chance of dropping out.
Correct. That's what I've seen.
Impaired thinking and ability to learn and perform complex tasks.
I've seen that too.
Now, this is something that I have experienced. Not me personally, right? Lower life.
Let me counsel you through that.
This is not confession time.
Come. You could do confession in front of the whole of Trinidad and Tobago.
Lower life satisfaction.
That's correct.
I mean, I don't know if it's your experience, but you can tell by the way somebody dresses. The way they comb their hair, they don't comb their hair.
They dumb down. That's the best. That's a good British term.
They dumb down.
They dumb down their life. So whatever they could have pitched their life at is dumbed down to something much lower than that. You see that impaired thinking?
Yeah.
I have had that with many young people on marijuana. They cannot think and reason straight. They just stop hearing, stop processing, and stop reasoning. And everything is geared towards the solution they want, which is for them to smoke marijuana. And so it is not, you cannot have a normal, reasonable conversation about it. It's a whole other thought process that I meet. And the first time I met it, I said, boy, this is weird.
Yeah.
By the third time, I said, but there's a trend. And so it is even that the young person stops having the capacity to have a normal, reasonable conversation that goes from A to B to C to D with a logical conclusion. You will get them to D, and their conclusion will be different.
Judith Grisel, as a teen, was an avid user of marijuana, you wrote. Now, as a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Bucknell University, she has a very different perspective. She sounds a warning about the use of marijuana by teens. She says it is not surprising that heavy smoking teens show evidence of reduced activity in brain cell circuits critical for flagging newsworthy experiences.
She's a neuroscientist.
Yes. 60% less likely to graduate from high school and are substantially increased, right, and at a substantially increased risk for heroin addiction and alcoholism.
Correct.
And I mean, this is what basically what we're seeing. Now, we're going to be opening the lines for you all to call in because I know that there are plenty. I've been getting some WhatsApp messages here already.
WhatsApp
well, one of the WhatsApp, what about those using marijuana for religious purposes? That's a question. That's a WhatsApp.
Well, we're in the Caribbean, eh? We're in the Caribbean. Well, you know, again, that's a different topic again. It's like medical marijuana.
Yeah.
In medical marijuana, CNN has been playing a lot of that medical marijuana thing. And what they've been doing is demonstrating the good effects of marijuana for medical reasons. Yeah. And therefore it must be good. Therefore it must be good. Now, I know the East Indians used marijuana long ago without all the harmful effects, but that was a pure form, number one, and it was not recreational use, number two. So it was not as it is being used now in a regular way. The more that the marijuana has been altered and the more the use has increased, is the greater risk that we have of real challenge.
Good night. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner.
Oh, we have a caller.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, sir.
And blessings.
To you too.
Good. so you brought up some of the points I wanted to ask. The last one you just made there, Derek, concerning religious. Where I know where we lived there, they had a guy who used to live on top of the hill, and he used to sit down and pray and smoke his thing. Then the next thing now, His Grace, when he spoke about psychosis, he made me laugh. At night, a guy wrong by us, he smoked and he had everybody running after because all of a sudden he started to jump me. Yes. And my other question, I don't know any research, Derek, if you saw anything about women who are pregnant, what's the effect?
That's
and also, Your Grace, you made an important part about people in prison. A man get hold with one joint, well, let us say he's supposed to serve 2 months. 4 years pass and he's still on remand because he cannot make bail, which is, I find it is totally unfair, and that is an injustice in itself. Have a blessed night, my brothers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the caller made 3 very good points.
Yeah, yeah.
So you take in the pregnancy.
I'm going to take in the pregnancy. The same doctor who is a neuroscientist, she says she continues with the second level of challenge, the offspring of partying adolescents, specifically those who use the THC, may be at increased risk for mental illness and addiction as a result of changes to the epigenome, even if those children are years away from being conceived.
Correct.
So we're talking about, the caller just asked about,
what about pregnancy?
What about pregnancy?
So even 10 years before you have conceived your child, if you are a regular user of marijuana, you can put your child at risk.
At risk for mental illness.
Correct.
And addiction.
Yes.
Right? Thus, marijuana can affect the capacity of our children in significant and disastrous ways. Clearly, she says, the drug has serious social consequences for the individual, the family, and ultimately the society.
Now, and she starts her article by saying she was a user.
Yeah, yeah.
Now turned a medical scientist, and now thinking differently about this whole legalizing thing than she used to think when she was a younger person. But that's important. So the caller also spoke about people in jail. And, we have a serious problem in this country, because if somebody gets charged, they have no money for jail, for bail, no money for a real lawyer. They could get lost in jail for years,
yes,
and never get back out.
Just for smoking a joint.
For smoking a joint.
We have another call. Good evening. Welcome to Shepherd's Corner.
Good evening, Your Grace. Good evening, Deacon. Thanks for taking my call. I think this show would raise in viewership for this night especially, because I figure a lot of people will be calling one another to say what is going on Trinity.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask some questions on, I don't know if you'll be able to answer. Have there been any murders connected to the marijuana industry?
Oh.
Right? I wonder if we do not have enough problems as it is with alcohol and gambling and other addictions, hard drug addictions, to want to legalize marijuana. Is there a difference between medicinal marijuana and the type that people would normally smoke? And the last thing I want to find out, make this comment is, I heard a gentleman, it was on the television, one of those stations, a couple of weeks ago, and he said that marijuana to him is like communion. So I like to listen to you.
That's the religious use of marijuana, which we've dealt with already. So what's the first question you have there?
Well, one of the things that he asked is, can we attribute any murders to marijuana?
I used to be parish priest in a certain community. Let me not call names in the community. The gangs in that community, part of that was the marijuana trade. And part of the problem with the marijuana trade is the turf wars. And part of the problem with the turf wars is the gang murders. There is direct connection between guns, marijuana, and the high level of murder in this country. And that's not a haphazard thing. As our drug use has increased, our guns have increased, and murder rates have increased. In 1986, we brought a Professor Bromley into Trinidad and Tobago. New Life Ministries did that. And when he came and he saw how cocaine was being used, he said, you all have a problem that's way out of hand. He said, we have just discovered how you all are using cocaine here in Trinidad and Tobago. They used to use the Zoosh method. He said, we're just discovering this, but this has been here on your streets for a long time, and your cocaine is so cheap. So the drug industry, and he said, you know, you're not going to recognize this place for your high murder rates, for your criminal activity, etc., etc., etc. The drug industry, criminality, the murder rate, they go hand in hand, whether we like it or we don't like it. And so some people say, well, then decriminalize or legalize.
They say legalize.
They would say legalize it and you wouldn't have all of that. Well, no, you will still have it because there is this thing, this connection between these three things.
You talked about marijuana and communion.
Well, that's back to the religious interpretation and the religious understanding. And that's not one that I could pronounce on easily.
Yeah.
Because I know the Rastafarians see marijuana as the holy communion. And that's part of their whole psyche and their understanding. And I think, you know, in places like Jamaica, that has had to be taken more seriously. In places where the Rastafarian community is small, it has not been taken as seriously. But that's not one that I could comment on easily.
Okay. The other thing that he spoke about was marijuana for medical purposes.
Now, that's a big one. You know, we use heroin for medical purposes. And heroin is an opioid that is an illegal drug and an illegal substance. But there are clinics that are licensed to be able to use heroin and extract from it the medical use so that its core drug is extracted for medical use. So heroin, if it could be licensed for particular labs to be able to do that extraction to make medicine, we could do the same thing with marijuana.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't need us to legalize marijuana. What it needs us to do is to give a license to particular clinics and give a license to certain farmers to grow marijuana for medical use.
Okay.
And then there's a process that they use. And this is something that is done for many opioids. Not every clinic in the States could do this work, but you get licensed to do it. And so the same thing can happen for marijuana.
Okay, because you said that evidence seems to support the position that it can be used medicinally. And you said I have known many people using marijuana to self-medicate for ADHD and other challenges.
Yes. There are some young people who drifted onto marijuana, and the drift onto marijuana was really as a self-medication because they noted that when they smoked, they didn't feel as jittery, or they didn't feel as hyper, or they didn't feel as this, or they didn't feel as that. And so the start of the use was really a self-medication. And I know there's certain types of seizures where marijuana is a very good medicinal form for helping or for curing or at least for keeping it at bay. So there are many ailments where marijuana as a plant and its extracts have been very useful for medical purposes. But yes, let's license clinics and let's extract that drug. You don't have to smoke it to have the effects. It could be put into tablets, it could be put into liquids, it could be put into oils. They could put it into all kinds of things. So I hear the medical marijuana argument, and I think it's a valid argument, but I think that could be dealt with as a pharmaceutical in the normal way that would be done.
And in itself, that could be a legitimate industry.
It can be a legitimate industry.
Okay. Addiction. The addiction, listening to actually this is research, they say addiction, about 9% of adults and 17% of people who started smoking as teens become addicted. That means 1 in 10, right? And 17%, so that's even higher, right? People who started smoking as teens became addicted to marijuana.
Yeah.
So that we were in a room with 100 people, 17 of them will be addicted.
Correct.
If they started using as teens. And a lot of our people are starting to use this as teens. Right?
And that's a serious problem. Now, you know, the whole world has gone through this de-emphasizing of cigarettes. And there's a whole campaign to bring cigarette smoking down to minimal levels and to make it less socially acceptable and on and on and on. And marijuana is far more dangerous than cigarettes.
Yes.
And so why would we be opening up a highway to ingesting the smoke, which does not have proper filters, which cigarettes have, which will be damaging the lungs anyhow, which on and on and on and on, when we're trying to tell kids don't smoke cigarettes? It doesn't make sense. Why are we pushing on it?
Is that a paradox?
No. No.
I have to bring that one in.
I know you wanted to bring that.
I want whole night I want to use a paradox.
You know,
legalize or decriminalize.
That is a paradox.
That's a paradox.
You know, I reached to Barbados and somebody said, now, before you go anywhere, you have to tell me that word you used. That was the last show I was on. Discombobulate. And concupiscence was the word he wanted to really get at.
Right.
So we had a great conversation about concupiscence. He said, well, where does it come from? I said, go back to the roots. Because one of them was a Latin scholar. So you go back to the roots. Concupiscence. So it comes from Cupid. Con is with Cupid. Cupid is the god of love. Yeah. So with love is the root of the concupiscence. So it's a distortion of love.
I want to go back to this thing. You say, I am completely opposed to legalizing marijuana.
Correct.
And that's because with the legalizing of marijuana, it then opens up a whole Pandora's box.
And it's a Pandora's box that we don't have the resources to actually deal with. Right now, we don't have the money to run social services in this country properly, and the health sector properly. We don't have all the drugs we need. We don't have enough counselors and psychologists staffing our clinics to deal with the current problems that we're dealing with. You're going to open up a highway to new problems that we don't even quite understand what that will look like and how that will affect anyone. And then when we start to experience the social impact of that, that will have an impact on the budget, because we're going to have to find money for the social fallout that we have to deal with.
Yeah. I want to go back to some of the long-term effects that came out of this study. Potential development of opiate use. And we are seeing a rise in opiate use all over the world.
Marijuana is a gateway drug, huh? It is a gateway drug.
Some people argue, and they say, Deacon Derek, I don't see how that's a gateway drug, but I say, follow the arrows.
Yeah.
Follow the arrows.
Yeah. Because there's some people might stay on marijuana for their whole life and never go anywhere else. Mm-hmm. But many people, because like any form of addiction, your body becomes more and more immune to it. And the more immune your body becomes, the more you have to heighten it to get the same effect that you would have got 5 years ago. So you keep on it for long enough, and eventually the marijuana itself wouldn't give you the effect that you used to have before, and therefore you're going to have to up it, and therefore
going to progress onto different drugs.
So you're either going to increase the amount or change your formulas.
I want to ask the viewing public, while they're outside there, some of the long-term effects. Have you all seen this with your friends who are on marijuana? Relationship problems, the intimate partner violence, intimate partner violence. And this
on marijuana?
Yes.
Wow. And
this is research coming out from Maria Elgren. This is research coming out from you know, a number of studies here that we did do some research on. So I will just, the American Psychological Association in November of 2015, right? FDA-approved medicine neither December 2014. Does marijuana affect sex drive? Prostate.net. So I want to give you all some places that you can go to. Antisocial behavior, including stealing money or lying, financial difficulties, increased welfare dependence, greater chances of being unemployed or not getting good jobs. All of these are long-term effects of using marijuana.
Correct. And you can't say they don't have social problems. You can't say they don't have health problems. And you can't say they don't have family problems associated with the use of marijuana. There are challenges for the individual, the family, and the whole society. And the testimony to that is the number of people in rehab center for marijuana use. Not just cocaine or alcohol or whatever else, but for marijuana use.
Now I know you may not have the figures or up-to-date figures, but when you were doing your work there, what percentage you would think of the people up at New Life Ministries were marijuana users?
I don't know that. I wouldn't know what that number is looking like now.
Yeah.
I really would not know. What I do know is when I was in the community, in the hills, that a high percentage of the guys smoke marijuana. And the guys who were working, who had decent jobs, were the ones who were not smoking.
Yeah.
And the ones who were actually clean. And a lot of the smoking were among the guys who were not working. And there's a slight correlation there, because if you're smoking, you're not pushing hard to achieve.
Right.
And therefore you're resting on whatever it is, and you're not going to up your game, you're not going to strive for excellence, you're not going to push and find a way through the maze.
But in the maritime industry and those who want to work offshore, first of all, they have to be clean. So lots of the guys know that if they're smoking, they can't go and apply for a job.
Correct.
Because one of the first things that they're going to ask them to
drug
do is,
test.
We want a drug test done.
Now. And they don't get warning. It's now.
No, that's correct. And you know, many times they will drug test you when you're about to enter the ship.
Yes.
You know, they will just shut it down and say, okay, we have a drug test now. Everybody has to take the drug test. Mm-hmm. You know, or they will check you when the ship is coming in, maybe after a week being offshore, to find out if you were using it offshore.
While you're on the boat.
While you were on the boat. So in the maritime industry, a lot of the people know that the energy companies are extremely strict.
Have to be.
Because
safety,
accidents
safety,
and incidents.
safety.
Correct.
Safety, safety, safety.
So greater chances of being unemployed or not getting good jobs, increased welfare dependence, financial difficulties. Are you all experiencing that with the people that you are living with? Do you have any...
or family members that you know?
Lying, stealing, right? Including stealing money or lying, antisocial behavior.
I've also found with people on marijuana, but especially young people on marijuana, they become antisocial in the sense that they withdraw. They pull away from. They no longer relate the way they did before. Their whole personality goes through a change, and they become much more turned in and much more, using the word again, dumbed down. That's the word for today. Eh?
Dumbed
down. That's the word for today, dumbed down. Much more dumbed down, because they're not the person that they were before. There was a guy in one of the countries where I worked, well, two in countries where I've worked, where teenagers on marijuana, and I just saw the way these kids were dumbing down in front of my eyes. Intelligent, bright, young people who had vitality, and you just start to see them becoming a shadow of who they were before.
Yeah, I even see it in sportsmen. Guys who had amazing ability,
correct,
potential to be world beaters, because of their marijuana use. You
came
know,
straight down.
They came straight down, or they were always...
The word today is...
dumbed down.
Dumbed down.
Dumbed down.
They were
dumbed down.
That's a very good British word, you know.
In conclusion, You see, once the big media begins to invest in documentaries or programs designed to normalize behavior we once rejected, you know it's a campaign.
Yes. If you look at CNN, you cannot help but see CNN has a campaign for legalizing marijuana, mixing up medical marijuana and legalizing marijuana. They tying the two pieces together. Have you ever turned on CNN and seen the marijuana documentary of all these people on seizures and how they use marijuana and how that has healed them and they've gotten better and without the marijuana this is what's happening and look with the marijuana this is how good they look and so on. That's medical marijuana. That's different from legalizing and decriminalizing. That's a totally different ballgame. Let's deal with the medical marijuana for what it is, because anytime we find a medicine that is valuable for the human being, we should extract it and use it. So I don't see why that comes into legalizing or decriminalizing. That comes into giving a lab a certificate to be able to deal with that.
Well, I have a WhatsApp message here. The WhatsApp message, it says, well, that means that you are giving big industry, big industry an advantage over the small farmer.
Why?
Because it's the big industry who will be able to invest and so on and develop the marijuana. While the small man who wants to grow his little herb, you know what I mean? You're removing this from him.
Well, right now, I ain't removing nothing because he ain't supposed to grow it in the first place. So yes, it will, because it will have to be grown under very controlled circumstances and transported from there to the lab under very controlled circumstances, yes.
You see, the confusion being perpetuated between legalizing and decriminalizing and medical marijuana may be all part of the campaign to legalize the marijuana. And this is where I guess you're getting into with CNN.
Yes.
And certain advocates in Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the Caribbean.
Yes.
And some of them are professors at UWI.
Yes. They must have high knowledge about the marijuana industry. I know in Jamaica, there's a whole push for decriminalizing or legalizing marijuana in Jamaica for years now. That's not a recent thing. And that is amplifying and escalating and going up and up and up. So there is a Caribbean push on this matter. When I heard the Prime Minister speaking about it, I understood clearly what he was saying. He used very specific examples. He used the example of the young boy who, for smoking one joint, has now a criminal record, has been put into jail, and has then been turned into a criminal. Now, I agree 100% with him that that is not good for the boy, for the society, for the family, for nobody. And certainly not for the criminal justice system that's being clogged up with cases when they have more serious cases that they should be dealing with. So that, on no level is it good. And that's where I'm agreeing that the process of decriminalizing would deal with what the Prime Minister is most clear about and wants to address. And decriminalizing was the word he used. The head of DOMA, Gregory Aboud, that's the same word that he used. It's the word that I'm using, decriminalize.
I want to go, you said, let's decriminalize, expand drug courts, support addiction counseling and rehab centers for those caught with possession and need treatment for addiction. What's your key message?
You tell me.
Marijuana is highly addictive.
And
has many social consequences for users, abusers, and society, but it should not be a criminal offense.
To say that marijuana is okay is to not understand the problem. But to say that it should criminalize a person is to not understand the problem. You wanted a paradox? That's your paradox.
That's the paradox.
Yes.
Again, I just want to end, just remind people some of the things that we spoke about this evening, right? This same doctor said, I started using on a dare from a best friend who said that I was too chicken to smoke a joint and drink a quart of beer. I was 14 at the time. After 7 years of using and drinking, I found myself at the end of the road with addiction. I was no longer using to feel euphoria. I was just using to feel some semblance of normality. And this started as
At 14.
At 14 years old.
One use.
Then I started having negative feelings about myself and my own abilities. I hated the paranoia, suspicion of distrust or fear of other people. I hated looking over my shoulder all the time. I really hated not trusting my friends. I became so paranoid that I successfully drove everyone away and found myself in the terrible place no one wants to be in. I was alone.
That's a powerful testimony.
Final prayer and a blessing.
Father, we thank you that we can gather, that we can join in thinking, in reflecting. We pray for all those in the throes of marijuana addiction and all addiction in our society today. We ask, Lord, that you show us light and show us the way forward to build a true, just, and wonderful society, Trinidad and Tobago. We make our prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.